في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت الحكيم العليم. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. Inshallah, we did the introduction last week, and it's actually should have been on here. It's page 1, so I'll get that to you. For people that had this before, please burn the other one. Don't throw it away because it has the Arabic on it. Burn it or shred it or something. Because there's been, what's that? I don't know. If it doesn't shred the letters, you still have to burn it. So, because the letters, I mean, technically all languages are actually considered sacred and should be honored. That's what I was taught by one of my teachers, Mauritanian Sheikh, because he said the probability of the language having revelation is too high. And so, but Arabic definitely, these letters are in the Quran, and there are verses of the Quran that are letters. Alif, Lam, Mim, those are letters, right? So, and then to respect for the written word. So, but discard that because there are mistakes in it, and I corrected them, most of them, inshallah. And because this is a work in progress, as they say. All right. So, after the introduction, he says, فَقُلْتُ بَادِئًا بِقَرْبِ الْبَدْءِ إِذْ هُوَ أَشْرَفُ مَعَالِ الْبَدْءِ. And this in Arabic, there's a play on words here. He says, I began by starting with the heart of beginnings, or I say beginning with the heart of beginnings, which is courtesy spelt backward, since this is the highest and noblest of beginnings. What he's saying is, you look at the word al-bad', right, which is, it has to do with like beginning. Bada'a yabda'u is the root, and from it you get Bedu, the first people, Bedawi, the Bedouin. What happens, he says, فَقُلْتُ بَادِيًا بِقَلْبِ الْبَدْءِ. I say by qalb al-bad'i. It literally means the heart. I begin with the heart of beginning, but it's a play on words, because it also means, and I begin by flipping bad'i, the word bad'i, around, because qalb means heart, but it also means to turn over. So what he's saying is, I'm beginning by flipping the beginning over, and if you flip it over, you get adab, right? So the word bada', which means beginning, if you turn it around, it means adab. So what he's saying is, I'm beginning with adab, right? It's just the Arabs like to do things like this in their poetry and in their writing. It's a wordplay. So he's saying, I begin with the heart of beginnings, and he means by that adab. So he's saying that he's beginning with adab, because this is the highest and noblest of beginnings. فَأْدَبْ مَعَ اللَّهِ عَلَى وَجَلَّ بِأَن تُلَازِمَ الْحَيَاءُ وَالذُّلَّ. So he's saying, have adab with Allah. Now the word adab in Arabic means a lot of things. Adib has come to mean an erudite person. Somebody who's learned is an adib. And the reason the Arabs say that is because generally with learning comes manners. And so really at the root of the word adab is courtesy. There's an idea of courtesy. So somebody who's a mu'addib is a teacher of children. So the idea that the mu'addib, if you look at the word mu'addib, it literally means the one who is causing somebody to have adab. So the teacher of children is somebody really who's teaching them how to behave properly. That's the idea. So behavior is at the heart of this science. It's about proper behavior. And what he's saying is, فَأْدَبْ مَعَ اللَّهِ. Have adab with Allah. Behave properly with Allah before anybody. Right? That's the most important thing, is to behave properly with Allah. And how do you do that? That's what he's saying. بِأَن تُلَازِمَ الْحَيَاءُ وَذُلَّ. You do it with two things. Haya and dhul. Now, haya in Arabic, which, is anybody Filipino here? Huh? Now there's a word that they use in Tagalog, which is really important in Filipino culture, not just Muslim culture. Haya or... Huh? Hiya. Is that it? Yeah, in Filipino, shame. In Filipino culture, not just Muslim, amongst the Tagalog, the northern Filipinos, hiya is shame. It's a very important concept in their culture. Christian Filipinos as well as other Filipinos. And that is from the Muslim influence on the Filipinos, because the Muslims had a big influence on the Filipinos before the Spanish got there. What's that? In Pakistan, same thing. Yeah, haya is a big concept here. Now, the root word of haya is related to life itself. Right? Hay is living. Hayat is life. It's related to life itself. Now, there's a famous hadith that every religion has a quality that is characteristic of that religion. لِكُلِّ دِينٍ خُلُقٍ وَخُلُقُ الْإِسْلَامِ الْحَيَاءُ. And the character of my religion is haya, is shame. Now what shame means, right? We use this word shame. And if you grew up in this culture, probably not anymore. But and you're dating yourself by admitting this. But if you grew up in this culture, you would have heard as a child, shame on you. Right? Shame on you. And now it's a bad word, shame. In modern American culture, don't shame a child. It's considered a bad thing to do. Everything, it's okay, self-esteem, make them feel good about themselves. Even if they just slit their brother's throat, well, he's obviously had a trying childhood and, we have to make allowances or something. I mean, this is what this culture has gone to. In traditional culture, they divide cultures into shame and guilt cultures, anthropologists. They say that guilt is an inward mechanism and shame is an outward mechanism, which shows how much they understand about this concept. What they mean by that, guilt comes from a German word which has to do with debt. And so when you're indebted, you feel an obligation to the person you're indebted to. The idea is, what guilt does, if you do something wrong, there's an internal mechanism that you feel guilty. And you want to relieve that guilt by rectifying what you've done wrong. So, most primitive cultures are not guilt-based cultures. They're shame-based cultures. The reason you don't do something wrong is because you don't want other people to shame you. You don't want other people to say, how dare you do that? How shame on you. And you don't want to bring shame on your family, on your tribe, on these things. Now what Islam does to that concept is it honors it. It honors it. In this culture, it's been completely dishonored. It honors it. But what it does is it takes it to another level. And that level is that you have shame before Allah. In other words, you recognize that Allah, even if people don't see you, Allah always sees you. And you have shame before the angels. So it takes it to another level, which is the unseen world. So the Muslims are a shame-based culture, but that shame transcends the cultural sense of feeling shame towards one's elders or towards one's parents, and takes it to another level which has an interior mechanism that is not akin to guilt. So the point is that haya is having shame before Allah. And that's why he says, if you want to have adab with Allah, in other words, correct behavior, have shame. Have a sense of shame. In other words, have a feeling that Allah is watching you, and so you feel shameful to do something that's displeasing to Him when you know He's watching you. In the same way, most healthy people don't want to do something displeasing to their parents when they watch them, because their parents are the means to which they came into existence. They've supported them all their life. They've, the mother changed cleaned the child and spent nights awake for the child, all these things. So this is an honoring of the parents, and you don't want to do something that you would feel ashamed of in front of your parents, right? So that's what he's telling us. And then the other thing, another thing that he tells us is to have dhul. And dhalil is somebody who is... Dhalil is somebody who is lowly, abject, humbled. Dhalil. Like dhilla. Dhul wal hawan in the Quran, it mentions about people that incur the anger of Allah get this dhul thrust upon them. What he's saying is, have this before Allah. Be dhalil. A dhalil is like a slave that's afraid to do anything in the presence of his master. There's a type of humble. And so that's what his definition of adab is, having these two things. And then he says, munkasiran tahta al-haya wa khadi'a tahta al-mahabati ilayhi dari'a. Not only that, but being dejected out of shame. You're munkasir. Munkasir means broken, in kasara. So you're literally broken in the presence of Allah when you recognize that you're bringing to Allah yourself and your wrong actions, and it's what they say, it's not much to write home about, right? In other words, when you really think about all Allah has given you, and then you think about what you've given to Allah, you feel this inkisar, munkasiran tahta al-haya, out of shame, khadi'an, and also khada'a means to be humbled before Allah in awe. تحت المهابة إليه ضارعة, and imploring Him to change your state. So this is what he's saying is adab with Allah. And then he says, مُلْغٍ مُرَادَكَ إِلَى مُرَادِهِ خَارٍ مِنَ الطَّمَعِ فِي عِبَادِهِ. That you give up what you desire, your designs, you're emptied of them for what He desires of you. So now what it's saying is you're giving up what you desire. And the Prophet ﷺ said, or is reported to have said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. None of you truly believes until his desires are in accordance with the very thing that I've brought. In other words, your murad is the murad of what the Prophet brought, and what the Prophet ﷺ brought is what Allah wants from us. So that's what he's saying is adab with Allah, is to give up your designs for His, emptied of desire, and moreover not having tama'. Tama'un is greed, avarice, desire, right? Always wanting something out of something. Every time you do something, there's an ulterior motive. That's a tama' is somebody who's always got, he wants something out of it. What's in it for me? That's always his root. And he's saying get rid of that concerning His servants. In other words, don't want anything from His servants. Want something from Allah, because Allah is the one that possesses everything. So this is what he's saying. This is how he begins, by giving us a definition of adab. And ultimately, and then he says, مُبَادِرًا لِأَمْرِهِ وَمِن دَخَلْ. Dakhalun in Arabic is a hidden fault. It's a aib inside you that nobody sees. And he's saying, مُبَادِرًا لِأَمْرِهِ, quickly go to what he's commanded you to do, and beware of this isa'at al-adab, this hidden fault of bad adab with Allah, having bad courtesy with Allah. And it's very subtle, because there's a hadith that says, إِنَّ أَحَدُكُمْ لَا يَتَكَلَّمُ بِكَلِمَةٍ لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا وَتَجُرُّهُ سَبْعِينَ خَرِيفٍ فِي النَّارِ. One of you will say a word, and he gives it no consideration at all, and it will take him 70 years into the hellfire. So the point is that adab it's a subtle thing, and loss of adab. And this is why one of the things that you learn in diplomatic circles is there's something called protocol. And very common amongst people who get into circles that they really don't belong in is they make breaches of protocol and they don't even know it. And everybody else is totally aware of it. Now this is exaggerated in a genteel society where all the forks, there's like for every, and it's obviously an object of comedy in a lot of films, where somebody will not know which fork or knife to use with the salad, and he's making a fool of himself. It's a breach of adab, right? And sometimes you're aware of it, but other times you're not, right? Now, obviously, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many things, if you don't learn the commands of Allah, you won't know when you're breaking them. If you don't know what a stop sign is, you just pass through it. You know, somebody says, didn't you see that what? The stop sign. Oh, that red thing? Is that what that means? Yeah. If you don't know what it means, you don't care. You just go right through it. Right? But the problem is, accidents happen that way. And with Allah, bad things happen. When you breach adab with Allah, bad things happen. You bring harm on yourself. This is why he's saying, fi ayyi wajh, this should be a serious fear of yours to have. And I was once in Mauritania, and I was with this sheikh, and we saw this mouse, and it was coming out of this hole, and it would come out, and if it just heard one sound, it would stop and shoot back into the hole. And he said, that's taqwa. You know, that is taqwa. It's you're worried about getting eaten alive by your own mistakes, right? So you have this kind of wajal, or this fear of Allah. Now ultimately, it turns into love. I mean, that's the highest maqam, and he'll get into that later. So our fear is not like, Allah's this horrible. No, on the contrary. But you don't want to incur the wrath, because Allah does have a wrath. And then he says, here, I'm going to go through this quicker than I did the last time, because we need to get on with this. And then he said, إِن تَتَحَقَّقْ بِصِفَاتِكَ تُمَدْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْعَبْدُ بِأَوْصَافِ الصَّمَدِ. If you realize your attributes of servitude, you are assisted with the attributes of the independent one. What this means is, if you have haya, if you have dhul, if you have faqr, right? Poverty, right? And if you realize these qualities or these attributes and empty yourself, right, of all its opposites, like shameless behavior, arrogance, kibr, or izz, actually. And khudu' is the opposite of kibr. And then faqr, ghina. What he's saying is, if you realize, so this is shame, poverty, and humbleness, and right, so you get freedom, wealth, and izz, dignity. What he's saying is, if you do that, then you will gain dignity from Allah and wealth. So in other words, by realizing your ubudiyyah to Allah, you get the hurriyah. That's real freedom. Because in completing your ubudiyyah to Allah, you're no longer a slave to yourself. And that's the only free person. Right? Anybody who's a slave to... If you can't control yourself, you're a slave to yourself. Somebody can say, I'm free. But then when the food shows up, they can't stop themselves. That's not freedom as far as the Muslims are concerned. Somebody say, I'm free. But when an opportunity to have illicit relations emerges, they can't control themselves. Right? Even if they're the President of the United States. Right? Seriously. He's a Rhodes Scholar, went to Cambridge. Highest levels of education. And yet he's a slave to the lowest aspects of himself. He can't control himself. Right? And that, for us, that is not a free person. That is Abdul Hawa. He's slave of his passions. So Abdullah is the one that when that situation arises, he has taqwa of Allah. And even though the temptation might be there, the desire, because human beings are human, the shahwa might be there, something like that, he can control it because he's not a abd of it. He's a sayyid of it. So if it's the wife or the husband, then the shahwa is mubaha, it's permissible. But when it's illicit, khalas. And that's the hur. That's somebody who's free. Same with any other shahwa. You look at all of them. They're all the same. And those are the more common ones. Imam al-Ghazali says the stomach and the genitals are the two dominant ones. If you can control those, the other ones are easy. But the tongue is the same. There's people who can't stop backbiting. You tell them. You can tell them. And I've seen this amaze me. I've seen this literally. I've pointed out to somebody something, and then less than 3 or 4 minutes later, they just start saying the same thing without even being aware. I've seen, and I'm sure I've done things like that as well. I mean, I'm not pointing out, but I've seen that many times. So there's that exists in us, this inability to control our tongues, to speak badly about others, to say things that we really shouldn't be saying, and people can't control it. They can't control it. So learning to control the tongue is a major thing. All these type of things. So if you realize this, you'll gain izzah and wealth from Allah. Now, part of the problem with human beings is they don't want to be impoverished. They don't want to be humbled. They don't want to be, because they perceive in these qualities abjectness. I don't want to be poor. Right? And yet the Prophet ﷺ chose poverty over wealth. He chose it. He didn't have any money in his house. He slept on the floor on a bed made out of some leather and palm fibers. Right? He didn't have any jewelry. He didn't have any. He had 2 pillows in his room where guests used to come. Total poverty. In this culture, if that's the way somebody lived, they'd be in a state of total humiliation. Why? Because they're looking at what other people think, not what's the best thing for me. So what he's saying is that you'll have dignity with Allah. You're mu'azzaz with Allah. You're mu'azzaz with Allah. I mean, look at in Surah Yasin, the prophet who came, they came to warn the people, and the people were threatening them. Allah says, "Azzazna bi thalithin." We gave them izzah with a 3rd. So Allah gives izzah to whoever He wants. يَعِزُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُذِلُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Right? Allah, تُعِزُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. You give izzah to whoever you want, and you humble whoever you want. Right? I mean, you look now at people in the world who used to rule the world, and now their offspring are begging. They're begging. They used to rule the world, and now their offspring are begging in the streets. Right? It's an amazing thing, and Allah can do that to any people He wants. And so the secret of creation is that if you realize the opposite attribute, that Allah gives you its opposite. In other words, if you realize humility before Allah, Allah will make you aziz before the people. But if you're arrogant with Allah, He'll maybe let it go for a little while, but when He takes you, He completely humbles you before everybody. Right? That's what happens. And so this is a big secret that He's giving us. So He's saying, indeed, there's no... And then He's reminding us, وَلَا نَجَاةَ كَنَّجَاةَ الْقَلْبِ. There's no salvation like the heart salvation. Right? None. إِذْ كُلُّ جَارِحٍ لَهُ مُلَبِّي. Because every limb answers the heart. See, what he's saying is if your heart is saved, your limbs are saved. But if your heart's not saved, your limbs aren't saved. And this is why there's a hadith that the tongue, the heart lies under the tongue. Right? Now the tongue is the most, it's called tarjuman al-qalb. It's the interpreter of the heart. Because it's telling you what's in the heart. That's why a munafiq is so wretched, because he's saying with his tongue what's not in his heart. And that's not what the tongue was created for. It was created to express what was in the heart. So he's oppressing his tongue and his heart. Right? So the heart is an amazing organ, because the tongue articulates it. Now, the tongue is what takes people to hellfire. So, if the heart is rectified, then the tongue is rectified. And that's why Allah will always say, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Say good, be upright in the way you speak, because that's an indication that the heart's upright. It's translating what's in your heart. If your tongue's upright, it means your heart's upright. And that's why all the limbs every morning, when they wake up in the spiritual world, they all shake according to the hadith. And they say to the tongue, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِينَا إِنْ اسْتَقَمْتَ اسْتَقَمْنَا وَإِنْ أَعْوَجَجْتَ أَعْوَجَجْنَا. Fear Allah with us, because if you're straight, we're all straight. And if you go crooked, we're all crooked. Right? That's what all the limbs say to the tongue. And so a good deal of spiritual work is working on the tongue and doing dhikr of Allah, replacing empty chatter with remembrance of Allah, using the tongue for what it was created for, not wasting time with the tongue, not doing all these things. So the tongue is important, but the most important thing is the heart. And what he's saying is that بَعَادَ وَصْلِ الْبَدْءِ, and he again does a play with the adab, right? After the foundation of this beginning, which is adab, once you've realized adab, and realize that that's the whole point of existence in this world, is to have adab with Allah and with the creation of Allah. That's why you were created. To have adab with Allah and to have adab with the creation of Allah. Which is why the Quran is called Ma'dabatullah, the place you learn adab. It's in the hadith. It's Ma'dabatullah, it's the place you learn adab. So it was sent or revealed to teach us adab. After you've done that, then he's saying, فَالْإِتْقَانُ لِعِلَلِ الْأَفْئِدَةِ الثُّنْيَانِ. The second thing to put on your foundation is to know the diseases of the heart. You have to know that the heart has diseases, right? So once you've got your foundation, which is understanding adab and what it is, then you have to know knowledge of the heart's ailments. So after you have a firm grasp of this foundation, then a mastery of the heart's infirmities is the second stage, right? Because you can't get to maqamat. I mean, ultimately what we want is to be right with Allah. But that's trying to get, you're here and you want to get here, and you have to go up like that. So it's trying to get there without going up the stages, the process. And those are darajat. And Allah says He raises people in degrees. So the first degree is you have to recognize what you want, which is adab, and then you have to recognize what's preventing you from getting it. And those are the diseases of the heart. And so he says, عِرْفَانُ أَمْرَادِ الْقُلُوبِ وَالسَّبَبْ كُلٍّ وَمَا يُزِيلُهُ عَيْنًا وَجَبْ. Knowledge of the diseases of the heart and their causes, because you have to not only know what they are, but what causes them, and how to remove them, is an obligation incumbent on every human being. Ayn wajib, or on every adult Muslim. Now, what the ulama say is, you have to have some knowledge of them, right, to free yourself from them, because of the verse in the Quran that says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He has success, the one who nurtures his soul, and he's destroyed who stunts its growth. So tazkiyah, right, tazkiyah of nafs. right? And also because Allah says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. On that day, nothing benefits them, neither wealth nor children, only the one who comes to Allah with a pure heart. So according to the Quran itself, the only people saved on Yawm al-Qiyamah are people that have qulub salima. How do you get a heart, a salim heart? And it says Ibrahim had a sound heart, qalbun salim. So we want a qalb salim. How do we get a qalb salim? And it's interesting that salim is related to aslama, right? Aslama, Islam is moving towards that, aslama. He says that this is the ruling of the Imam al-Ghazali. There's a biographical note, you can read that, about Imam al-Ghazali, who's really the master of this science. And this poem is really an abridgment of Imam al-Ghazali's 4th volume of the Munjiyat and the Muhlikat and the Munjiyat. Those things that save us and those things that destroy us. But he is the master, radiallahu anhu, of this science, and he's the mujaddid of the 5th century, by consensus, by ijma' of the ulama that came after him.
What is the proof of Islam?
Hujjat al-Islam, that's a name that he was given. The proof of Islam. Hujjat al-Islam. That's his name. In other words, what it says is that the fact that Islam can produce somebody like Imam al-Ghazali is a proof that it's true. That's a proof. He himself is a proof of the truth of Islam. That's what that means. And he has massive impact on Christianity as well. People don't realize that, but he had an incredible impact on Christianity. His books were all translated into Latin within 100 years after his death, which is phenomenal. And a lot of their theology was from him. Also the refutation of the philosophers. Tahafut al-Falasifa is a very important book that he wrote. The Incoherence of the Philosophers.